So let's say we want to see somebody now, and there are so many as well at the moment, like, on Instagram, there's so many that say in their bio trauma, whether it be um, parenting trauma coach or some sort of relationship coach
Mm.
that deals with trauma, but some of these are not properly trained
Mm.
coaches. So, what problems can happen if you went to someone who's not properly trained?
Well, this is where I go off on a rant.
Oh, we need to hear the rant as well. I think it's important.
Well, I think first and foremost, what we're seeing, especially in COVID, I'm noticing a trend more and more, is that, and I perfectly, I empathise with the situation of many people, but some people's careers have just ended because of COVID, and there's this now that there's so much potential just to become a coach online. So people are having to change their careers, realizing that their career that they had before COVID was not sustainable. And now there's so many courses to qualify you as a coach and just make simple, easy money online. Um,
Mm,
and just invest in some short course and then suddenly you're qualified as a coach. I have a major issue with this. I
mm,
don't think this trend will end because of the nature of social media now is that we are encouraged to brand ourselves and really put ourselves out there and work and present us the very underlying principles of our work is a business model, and we can't get away from that. I'm not going to just throw everything out with the water out, the baby out with the water. But we have to be aware of these things, at least have an awareness that if we are going to someone,
mm,
first and foremost, this is my own personal opinion on this, to sort of try to address this ethical issue because we're dealing with vulnerable people
mm.
and we have a duty of care to these people. So we are obliged to work to gain as much training and take as much responsibility for the work we're doing so we can be of support to these people. They're our focus.
Mm.
Yes, we need to make money, there's no doubt about that, but that can't be our be and end all. And I often feel in the coaching world specifically, that is often this push of you've got to bring clients in. And my personal opinion of trying to convince someone they need me is highly unethical. I
Yeah,
I really have an issue with that, and I have an issue of taking. This is my own personal opinion of showing my life out to people as if I've got the ultimate life, and I'm presenting this is how life should be. Just
yeah,
branding myself. I feel very uncomfortable with that.
yeah,
So, with that rant out of the way, if someone's going out and looking for a practitioner, first and foremost, yeah, I'm not dissing the coaching world. I'm saying to be a coach, you need to have had some foundational training behind you, where you have supervision, you have your own personal sessions, you have observed hours. So in the UK, it's not going to be the be and end all, but I personally feel more ethically safe to say, is that practitioner BACP registered, which is the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapists, or some other equivalent body that is
mhm,
recognised? I know that that's not. There's obviously still people out there that are not working ethically or under the BACP or another body, but at
mhm.
least it gives some sort of
Right.
reassurance that this person's
Yeah.
been through some training, whereby they've had the observed hours, they've got the supervision, they're hopefully having their own personal sessions, although that's not an incumbent, it's not a condition to be on the BACP, but I believe that practitioners in any counselling should be having regular personal sessions. So I would say that they're affiliated to some professional body that has reputation. I think that's really important. That's
Yeah, I think
the
we have another one in Australia.
And then for me personally, if I'm going out there, I go through word of mouth. So I will feel really uncomfortable just trying and experimenting until I find someone that I'm comfortable with.
Mm,
And most of my clients that have come through me, how have they come through me? They've come through either word of mouth, or they've come through because of the social media posts that I put. I try to put videos out there, and I try to put posts out there that are informative, so people can get a gauge and a feel of me way before they reach out to me. So some people might be following what I'm doing online for a good 6 months, maybe a year, until they feel, I trust this person, I've got a sense. Then I will give them. So what I really like to see in a practitioner, this is what I try to embody, is I'm really putting myself out there for that client, not in a way where I'm compromising my own needs, but I'm not. I'm not. From the first and foremost, I give them a 3-hour consultation at the beginning just to get a sense of, do they feel I can help them. I'm regularly we're assessing our work through, and what's working for you, what's not working for you. So it's very client focused, whereby they feel their own agency. They don't feel I'm pushing them to do something. I might offer, say, well, these are my concerns. So it's a collaborative relationship. I think that's the best way to say it. It's not that I'm just like, do whatever you want. And I might offer my concerns when you want to go in that direction. We need to be mindful of this. So it's a collaboration between us. That's what I personally love to see in a practitioner. That it's a collaborative relationship. They're not pushing and having an agenda. They have things. They have services available. They have maybe products they're offering, but it's always, you can have them if you want to. If you don't want them, but we're not pushing an agenda on the clients. And I feel that creates a safety and the trust in the relationship, while this person really feels that we're there for them. And so when you're working with a practitioner, I think that will help you sift through the people that are out there that really are not qualified to work with people who are vulnerable.
So what would be like an issue that could, like, would you say that could come up if you were to work with someone that was not properly trained?
Well, what's going to happen is often I feel what will happen is that in somatic experiencing specifically, when we work with trauma, we're starting with titration and pendulation and resourcing. These 3 principles. Resourcing meaning that I am trying to first and foremost find out what's working for you in your life, so we can have a foundation of when things are troubling, what we can come back to. So we don't just jump straight into let's work on your issues. We first and foremost work on what things like do you reach out to when you're really struggling. What things are there for you that are working, and we really try to understand how to work with resources with the principles of the therapy, which is how to understand how my body works. We're not trying to jump straight into heavy work, and I think that's often what can happen is that they're trying to push you to make changes straight away, and
Okay.
and
So would there
that's
be like emotional flooding then if
exactly,
people?
yeah. Here's an important thing for people to know is I say to people, if after the session you feel really awful, that can happen. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but if that perpetuates over a number of sessions and you're getting flooding, that's a sign I'm working you too hard. I like to look at therapy like I'm an emotional personal trainer. If I, as a personal trainer, are doing exercise with you, and every time I'm working with you, you're waking up in the morning and you can't get out of bed because your body aches so much, I'm pushing you too hard. That's your body
Yeah.
saying, this is too much for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
agree that. Yeah. We have this concept like detoxing in naturopathy, and they talk about the healing crisis. But I feel like the healing crisis was something that they would, um, that was more like a period, I think, where they didn't understand what was happening there and called it a healing crisis, which to a point, to some degree, you might need to go through that. But I do believe that that's the body saying we're going in too strong with this detox.
yeah,
The body needs support. We need to step back a little bit or give it additional support. That's the body reaching out saying, this is too much for me.
yeah, and you brought up a really important point that I think is really important to strike home, is that our bodies are not machines, they're animals. And what I mean by that is when we get in the car, we dictate how it should be. We turn on the key, we do this, and it complies. And we often, when we're going to this work, we treat our bodies like machines, as if it should operate in a way that I dictate and it responds. Now that can happen, and that's fine, but often it's not. Our body's more like a horse. When you get on a horse, you soon discover that that thing's got a mind of its own, and if we don't collaborate with the horse and meet its needs and listen to its messages back to us when it feels distressed or it feels like it's not being considered, that horse will rebel, and our bodies will do the same thing. Is that if we're pushing too hard, like you say, I always say, listen to the feedback. So after a session, the next session, I may say to them, how are things going now after the last session? And if there are flare-ups, now potentially that could be we push too hard. Let's just go with it. Let's assess that, keep that in the back of our mind. And it might take a few sessions before we recognise what your threshold of tolerance is. But we've definitely got to consider that, and then we're going to go slower. And a beautiful analogy that, what's her name? Babette Rothschild, she gave, who's a trauma therapist. She said, when we're working with trauma, it's like a Coke bottle fizzed up to the max. If I just open the lid on that, I'm going to get sticky and messy. So what do? In order to be able to drink or release that gas, we open gently. And we know it's not a cognitive thing. Our body senses when, that's a bit too much. So what do? We tighten it back up, and then we let it settle, and then we open it up again, and we keep doing that back and forth. And it may take a long time, but eventually you open it, just goes, kss. And that's how we work with trauma in somatic experiencing. Is this back and forthness until it's a gentle release. And the person feels their own agency and autonomy, rather, because half the trauma is that they had their agency and autonomy ripped from them. They felt completely overwhelmed by a situation or an individual, and they felt robbed of their own sense of power. And so we can, as practitioners, can reinforce that by going in there saying, right, I'm going to sort you out. And consciously they might think this person's here to help me. Their body might be saying, oh no, I'm not playing game here, and it withdraws. So we really need to understand the different parts of that we're all interrelated. Like Islam, Iman and Ihsan, these all overlap with one another. Islam being the physical, the prayer, the fasting, the Iman being our cognition, our beliefs, and then Ihsan being the lived reality. They all have an overlap with one another. Likewise, our body and our emotions and our cognitions and our spirituality, they all overlap with one another, and they need to be in communication and conversation with one another. And so listen to the feedback, whether it's physical, emotional, or cognitive, or spiritual.
Yeah, and so it really has to be a very individualized approach. And if there are any, I guess, treatment plans or anything like that where it's just following the textbook, that's probably when we see the problems.
And that's when a lot of people run awry, because what they do is I'm personally adverse generally to protocols. Just do this, do this, do this, do this. I feel like I'm having to give up my autonomy and just do this thing. I prefer a relational model where we're really seeing what's going on and showing up and being organic with what we're working with. And so I think that's what a lot of coaches, again, I don't like to bash coaches, or even I'd say some therapists, that's sometimes a danger in our work, is that we can instruct and just make them fit a model, and that's not necessarily going to be good for them.
Okay, so in your clinic, when you practice, when you are treating, what types of therapy do you use? Like here in Australia, there's a lot of psychologists that will use EMDR, or CBT is like that, the mainstream. Are there any other types of therapy that you use within your practice?
Well, I foundationally work as a somatic experiencing practitioner. So that is working, as I said, working with bodily sensations, learning about the three states, according to the polyvagal theory of ventral vagal, social engagement, feeling relaxed, or the rest and digest state, sympathetic, i.e. fight and flight states of activation, and then shutdown states, the dorsal vagal state where you feel completely withdrawn or shut off or disassociated. how to work with these states. That is my fundamental practice when we're working with trauma that's showing up physiologically. I blend it with general counselling, so I'm trained fundamentally in personal centered approach, like a Rogerian. But our training is I incline towards a pluralistic approach, and a pluralistic approach is working collaboratively with the client and accessing what's right for them. So some clients I work with it's a more CBT goal orientated approach, where we're really just working with tools, tangible tools, and that will help them enrich their life. Other clients I'm working completely process orientated. We're working with relationship. I'm holding space for them to explore, and it's much more experiential. It just depends what feels right for the client, and it sometimes takes me a while to work that out, and it needs a conversation with the client. So I encourage them that, again, it's a collaborative endeavor with them. I personally, and again, I'm biased here as a somatic experience practitioner, I'm averse to EMDR. Why? Because it's I think it's dealing things very symptomatically. You're just and again, there are different strands within the EMDR, so this isn't true for all of them, but it can be highly re-traumatizing, if you want to use that word, because in the somatic work, eye stimulation is very sensitive. When we're working with eye stimulation in somatic work, we go very gently. So we will apply. I've never actually done it with clients, but when we're working with, we look for blips in there. When they're looking, their eyes will jump, and then we will basically pause, and then get them to, if there's any activation come up, to settle that, like the Coke bottle analogy. Yeah. Like EMDR is very sort of, you're just committing to a protocol, and you're going with it. That sometimes can be really traumatizing for people, because it feels disempowering, and it feels like we're going to have to hit the hard stuff and just work it through. And so you can get a lot of flooding potentially with EMDR, but I think there are, I mean, again, I'm not that well educated with EMDR apart from the basics, but this is what I've heard from people that have done the EMDR. So again, I'm not putting people off EMDR. Just go in there with that awareness, and if you do start flooding or you feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable with things, feed that back to the practitioner. And if they're a good practitioner, they will take that into consideration. Say, right, we need to sort of revise the way we're working together, because that was too much for you. But if they're pushing and saying, no, you need to do this and this is good for you, that's usually a red flag for me when I'm working with it as a practitioner.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you've said about agency, because when someone's going through trauma, it's like their agency is being ripped off them, and then if they're going through therapy where again the agency is being taken off them, that can be, and I've heard my clients coming back to me not being happy with, one that comes to mind is when a therapist was pushing them for a name of who did this, and like I can't go back, I can't
I
go
mean,
back
that's
to
very
them.
unethical behaviour. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened,
Yeah.
but if that is happening, if someone's just pushing, and they're not listening to, I don't feel comfortable, then that's a red flag for me. If you can't have a
Yeah.
conversation with the therapist, I mean, on my own personal sessions, I sometimes feel sorry for my therapist, because I really say, no, not working, don't want that.
Well, lucky I'm not a counselor. um I like to I like to tell people, not exactly, but guide them into the right way. I mean, there's more than one way, but sometimes in naturopathy, because especially because we're working with herbs, you know what I mean? We're working with vitamins and herbs and diet that they don't have that knowledge of, where I do have to actually say, no, we actually need to take this one, or
Yeah.
continue with this one. So